Hello, this is Ace Comet fan here, and as you know, Ace Comet 7 has got a new trailer right now after the end of E3 2018. Now, it's interesting that Ace Comet 7's trailer was released after and not before the event. Overall, I think this is a good strategy from Bandai because it avoids Ace Comet 7 getting overshadowed by the bigger games, which I thought was interesting because many of them had been promoted before even the event started. But anyway, let's start our trailer analysis. So at the very beginning of the trailer we get this image of a beautiful sunrise, and you might call me crazy, but I think the sun is very important in Ace Combat 7, or at least on how the trailers are being done, because this new trailer features a lot of the sun and sunrise, and if you think about it, the previous trailers did the same thing. They featured a lot of sunsets in the last trailer, promotional materials such as screenshots, not screenshots, but wallpapers that we got from Project Aces also featured the sun. And lastly, if you think about it, on Mihai's Sukhoi 30 that he uses in the testing squadron from the Erosion Air Force, it also features the sun. And one way to think of it is where the last trailers they had a lot of this sunset that were of course followed by darkness, which could mean this whole time we didn't have any news about Ace Combat 7, we finally have the sunrise, or the return of the game for us, the fans. Now of course, there's a lot of crazy talk, but it's an idea. Going along, we have Project Ace's logo introduction with all the weather and all those water droplets, and right after that we get to see the F-15C inside the hangar together with the Rafale M, the A-10, which is the more modern version, the A-10C, which is also the first time it appears as a playable aircraft in an Ace Combat game, where the other previous games were the A-10A. And lastly, we have also the F-35 inside the hangar. Now, it is no surprise in this hangar scene because we already knew this aircraft would be featured in Ace Combat 7 due to previous trailers or screenshots, maybe except for the A-10, we just didn't know which version. But I'd like to point out there's a lot of detail on the background there. You can see there's a lot of cones, equipment, signs. Now, some have pointed out to me that this may or may not be for the VR section of the game where you get to walk around the hangar, but nice attention to the detail. After the hangar scene, we get to see more of the outside of the environment with the weather and the landscapes. The first part here is of the Choppingburg Forest, which is the mission tree in Ace Combat 7's main campaign. Right after that, we get to see more of the unidentified forest area, which we had seen previously in other trailers or screenshots. And after that, we see the desert with those mountains and again, the sunrise. Now, this may be familiar to those of you who have played Ace Combat 2, because this seems a lot like the Faith Park area. And if you don't recall, this is Mission El Dorado from Ace Combat 2, where you had to destroy some missile silos that were in between those rocks or mountains. Right after that, we get to see more craters, this one probably coming from Ace Combat 7's VR demo, the same location as it was presented there in the mission. And right after that, we have an air base, which I think is really interesting. Let's first look at the top left of the screen. You can see there are 4 smokestacks indicating that this base is under attack, and you can also see there are several aircraft parked there indicating that this is a scrapyard for planes. Now, scrapyards have been mentioned or featured previously in the Ace Combat series, like in Ace Combat 5, in the Solo Islands, where they were also owned by Osea. But I just want to point out this is a different location, as you can see from the vegetation and the area around. In between the mainland and the island, there is a bridge, which is more like a taxiway, so airplanes can go from one side and to the other. And looking at the airfield of the island, you can see there are some aircraft waiting on the tarmac. But more interestingly, if you look at the runway of the airbase, you can see there are lots of access there. This indicates that the runway is closed, or the airport is not in operation and you should not be able to land there, as if the airport had been deactivated. Yet, again, we have those aircraft in the tarmac, Why are they operating in an airport that is supposed to be closed? We don't know that. But this is not just the only part of the airport. On the left side, you can see the very beginning of another runway. That is because there's another airbase built right nearby. If we use another screenshot that we got from Ace Combat 7, you can see it's a pretty large facility, because in total there are 3 runways. And you can also see a little bit of this area during a short scene from a previous Ace Combat 7 trailer. From my understanding, this seems to be like the base of operations of the spare squadron, which we'll talk further along the video. And there's a lot of build up there. As you can see, there are some ships and docks and lots of facilities in and around that area. Right in the next part, we get to see several aircraft which apparently belong to the spare squadron, which is the Spino squadron. And you can see they're very diverse. There's a F-15 right on the right side, there's a Sukhoi 33 in the middle, and some F-18s right at the back. If we go further along the video, you can also see a Mirage 2000 taxiing. And these aircraft are all different. And I'm not just saying different on the models. Some of them, such as Trigger's, he has 3 strikes on the tail, some of them only have 1. The emblems are all different. Trigger has the dog with the gun, the Sukhoi 33 has the magic hat with some wings, and so on. Some of them belong to the Air Force, some of them belong to the Navy, so there's a different backgrounds for all these pilots. And all these different models of aircraft may indicate that they're all using aircraft from the scrapyard I just mentioned previously, that is just located close to the base. Now that makes sense, because since this is a Pinot unit, they want to give those low-end aircraft. Although you can see that these are what I might say modern aircraft, but maybe they already have accumulated lots of hours. I should also point out that on the tails, each aircraft has a different inscription. For example, Trigger has FG, probably indicating Fort Grace. The Sukhoi 33 says HK, which is probably a reference to Hierarch Air Force Base back in Ace Combat 5 and also Ace Combat 0. The F-18s, they have AD, which we're not sure, although there are some theories going around the internet that AD means Anderson, which was the captain of the carrier Kestrel from Ace Combat 5, so maybe there's an aircraft carrier called Anderson in his honor. And the Mirage also has MN, which might be a reference to the McNeely Air Force Base back from Ace Combat 5. I also want to point out that during the taxiing sequence, you can see a lot of heat distortion close to the Sukhoi 33, and this heat distortion has been featured previously in other trailers, but it's much more smooth this time. Project Aces has really polished their game. In the next scene, we get to see the Arsenal bird with its ring around the aircraft, which I'm not sure honestly on what that is at this moment, but I want to point out you to the curtain of missiles behind the Arsenal bird. I've counted it, and there are over 30 missiles. This is basically a Macross missile spam. After that, we get a cockpit view of the Sukhoi 57, also known as the Pak-I or the T-50. And I want to point out that this is only the prototype of the Sukhoi 57, because it has a metal on the canopy of the plane, which is only present in the very first prototype. So Project Aces has not updated the Sukhoi 57 for the production model. As a matter of fact, all the Sukhoi 57s in the Ace Combat series are based on the very first prototype of the aircraft. One thing I was looking for also in Ace Combat 7 was to be able to see the enemies on my radar screens inside the cockpit. However, that's not going to be possible, as you can see in this shot where the radar doesn't show the enemies. Although the cockpits are still there with their instruments turned on, so at least it looks pretty good. Next up is the Yinchi Valley. This region we've seen already before, doing a gameplay made by Kono during the Gamescom of last year, where, you know, there are lots of clouds, lightning, and also huge rocks, where some of the pilots ended up dogfighting at the clouds in the middle of the rocks, which is pretty crazy. And we are inside of the Rafale M in the cockpit view, and I want to direct your attention to the right side of the instrument panel where it says refuel vector and has a compass pointing towards the back of the aircraft. Now, I think this is a hint for the return of the return line from previous Ace Combat games, where you can go across the line, land at the base, refuel, grab more ammo, and come back to the mission area. So at least it's one of the things I'm looking forward to, but it's not confirmed yet. We get to see a little bit of a dogfight in between the huge pillars of rocks and forest. And we also get a little bit of a cinematic section here where we have an F-15 running away from the drones. Actually, I counted, and there are 12 drones modeled after the Barracuda going after this F-15. And it seems to me like the Erusians use their tactics. They are based on 12 drones because, as mentioned in a previous trailer analysis, actually analysis of the demo of Ace Combat 7, the Arsenal bird deploys 2 squadrons of 12 drones each. You're gonna be able to see the F-15 ejecting its external fuel tanks and running away, and when the camera pans over, you can get to see there are actually 7 F-15s. Now, I don't believe that this is Trigger. I think actually this is from the Cyclops squadron, which we have to help during the Yanchi Valley mission. After that, it's much more gameplay. We get to see the Rafale M maneuvering in between the huge pillars of rocks. We get to see the Sukhoi deploying its missiles against a transport plane. Get to see some more explosions with the A-10. The explosions, which are really detailed, and I love that. You can also see on the terrain, the mountains, to me they look pretty good. And this is on a score-based mission, which they will come back in Ace Combat 7. Also, if you look at the terrain, the roads, they look good. You can see several containers, and they're all 3D models. So definitely that adds to the experience, where we don't just have those flat buildings laying around. With the F-22 in combat, I want to point out the usage of combat flaps because of the lower speed, so you can keep flying. And also when hitting the drone, there are actually 3 explosions, which I think adds a lot to the detail. First, there is the missile detonation explosion. After that, there's the first explosion of the drone, and then a secondary explosion of the drone. It looks all pretty fantastic, and you can see all the debris flying around. At least one of the good things that came out of Ace Combat Assault Horizon. Also note that at this time, Trigger does not have the 3 strikes on his aircraft, and we'll talk more on the 3 strikes further along the video. As we continue, another beautiful dogfight between Trigger and Mihai in the Yanchi Valley, and the lightning also is really good. You definitely see the illumination, and as mentioned in a previous interview with Kono at Famitsu, lightning can affect your plane. It won't destroy you, but it's gonna make your HUD go crazy, and you're basically gonna have to rely more on your eyes than your instrument. And at the very end, we have the Arsenal bird, codenamed Liberty, showing its special weapon, which we don't know exactly what it is, just pulsing off and going into a larger area. Now, we're not sure if this weapon is able to shoot down the player or is acting as a shield or something of that sort, but that's the cliffhanger. After the name of the game is shown, we get to see a little bit of the sign of the 444th Air Base, which I believe is that mysterious air base that we've talked about previously in the video. So far we have finished the visual analysis of the trailer, but of course we must also take the audio into consideration. I want to make it very clear there are actually 2 different versions of the trailer which were released simultaneously. First, the North American version, and also the European version. Some lines were changed in each of these versions of the trailer because of the harshness and the vocabulary used. So before we start the audio analysis of the trailer, here are the differences between the European and American versions of the trailer.
How penal is this penal unit, you ask? This place is a shithole. Do you wonder what it means to be a prisoner here? Everything is rotten to the core. Today they tossed someone new into the mix. Wonder what he did to get sent here. Another newbie's been tossed into the mix. I wonder what sort of crap he's done.
And so these are the 2 versions of the trailer. At the start, the European one sounds harsher, but at the end, the American one is harsher on the vocabulary. Why? I don't understand. If you're interested, the Japanese version is the European version, but with Japanese subtitles. Starting the trailer, we have the Latin choir, which we heard previously in another trailer, and of course, there's no complaints whatsoever on the soundtrack and the instrumental part of the game. Also another great work by Project Aces. I think most of the fans which have been following the development of Ace Combat 7 already knew that we're gonna feature a Pinot unit in Ace Combat 7, but I think it just made more clear in the trailer of this game. And of course, that explains why the pilots are treated so bad.
Commencing deception and interception.
Deception and interception, that sounds like a job for the Expendables, right? And also, I love the startup sound of the engine, it's music to my ears.
Spare squadron, lead the way. Trigger, your call sign is Spare 15. Consider it your prisoner number for the air.
Today they tossed someone new into the mix. Wonder what he did to get sent here.
So apparently if you're on the Ocean military and you do something bad either in the Air Force or in the Navy, you get sent to this Pinot unit.
Spare squadron, 2 groups of bandits, bearing 300 from the reference point. You're cleared to engage. Show no mercy. Trigger's taking the beast head on.
By beast, do you mean Mihai, or is it another enemy that we haven't been presented yet?
You have 3 sin lines, right, Trigger? 4 scratches, the more heat is the crime.
Oh, I see, so these painted lines are called sin lines, and apparently you get one for every bad thing you do. So why does Trigger have 3 of them? What did he do so bad when the other members of the squadron have only 1?
Spare 15, work off your crimes.
Work off my crimes? Well, it's not like I have a choice, right?
Attention. Remember, you're not bona fide military. You're expendable.
I guess this last quote explains why our squadron is named Spare, and that literally nobody cares about us. Overall, this is a good comeback trailer for all the 8 months that the game has been without any updates to the fans, but I'll be honest, I expected a little bit more. The gameplay is more polished and the story is a little bit more clear, but there's no major or surprising facts that we learned from this trailer by itself. One exception would be the special weapon on the Arsenal bird, but I think that's more because of a plot convenience, because I think if we were able to destroy the Arsenal bird right in Mission 3, as it was almost possible in the demo, I think that would be way too early to destroy a super weapon of that size. So in my opinion, that laser thing or whatever is just a plot excuse so that the Arsenal bird can flee from Mission 3. And obviously, we'll find a way to destroy it later on in the game. I don't want to get too much into the theories behind the trailer and the story because I'll leave that to another video, but the most interesting thing here I think is for us to think, why did Trigger get sent to the Pinot unit? There are some different theories going around the internet saying that Trigger shot down his wingman or that he bombed civilians. Personally, I think he bombed some civilians because, well, the Ocean military is known for doing that, right? But anyways, I'll leave the theories for another video. Hope you guys have enjoyed this analysis. Let me know on what you think has made Trigger go to the Pinot unit, or if you prefer the European or the American version better. And see you guys next time.